y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is going to be a review for Impact Wrestling Slammiversary XVI. Now we're going to grade our matches on the review on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. With all that being said, let's jump right into the show. First match of the night is a 4-way X Division match. Kind of a number one contender. We have Fenix versus Petey Williams versus Johnny Impact versus Taiji Ishimori, the Bone Soldier. I love that they did this. I love that they started off hot and they came right out with what made Impact special in TNA formerly and different from the WWE was the X Division, was the stars of the X Division. Guys like Petey Williams and Austin Aries and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe set them apart. And I like that they gave right out front, we're coming out strong, a fatal four-way match. I thought this was a really good match. I liked it. Fenix shined, Ishimori shined, Johnny Impact shined, who's Johnny Mundo or John Morrison, Johnny whatever nickname, whatever last name for the company he's with at the time. Petey Williams got some spots in. Petey was a late replacement for Rich Swann, who I got injured. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was a hot opener. We get to the end, everybody hits their finishers. Johnny Impact picks up the win. Going forward, he's the number one contender for the X Division title. I like this a lot. Like I said, it was a hot opener. It got you off your seat. It got you excited. It got your blood going. You're ready for the rest of the night. And it set the table and set the bar pretty high. I'm going to give this match a 5 out of 5. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Probably one of my favorite matches of the night. And it just set up the bar. And it showed this is Impact Wrestling. This is what we're about. We're not WWE. And I love that they're going a different direction. Plus, we get to see where they're working with other companies. Ishimori from New Japan. Impact and Phoenix coming from Lucha Underground. So, we get a little bit of that we know what's going forward. Next up, we have a women's division match. Or knockouts division as they call it there. Tessa Blanchard versus Allie. I love both of these women. I think they're both great wrestlers. I think they're both got a huge upside potential to them. Allie is a stone cold Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, El Generico babyface. You can't not cheer for her. She just has that quality about her. And Tessa Blanchard is everything she says she is, plus more. She is one of the top talents in all of wrestling, women or men. Probably, if I was to make a short list of the top 5 wrestlers in the world, Tessa would probably be in that list. I mean, she's just amazing. And this, I really like this match. I liked the Tessa playing up the bully role. I liked her being more of a heel during the match, more of a cocky attitude. And I liked Allie playing off of that. I liked the innocence of Allie. Her, like I said, her natural baby face. She's such a great natural baby face. The fans want to get behind. I really, really enjoyed this match. Tessa Blanchard picks up the win with a hammerlock DDT. I'm going to give this match a 4 out of 5. A really good match coming off the first match of the night and another really, really enjoyable match to start the show. Next up, we have the House of Hardcore match. Eddie Edwards versus Tommy Dreamer, and basically this is an ECW rules, but they can't call it that, or Extreme Rules, or whatever you want to call it. A no-holds-barred fight. We've seen leading up to this, the story with Eddie Edwards kind of turning into Sami Callihan, and we've seen the questions with Tommy Dreamer. Is he trying to steal Eddie Edwards' wife? And I'm sorry, Eddie. As beautiful as Alicia is, and she's a beautiful woman, I don't think Tommy Dreamer is leaving Beulah McGillicuddy anytime soon for any woman. And I know Beulah's a little bit older, but she's still a very, very beautiful woman. So I digress. That's for a different story, for a different subject. But it fed into the storyline, his jealousy, his trust issues that he's having with Tommy Dreamer. I like this match. It had my favorite spot of the whole night. During the match, they're in the outside, and one of the fans has the ECW Championship, hands it to Dreamer, who whacks Eddie Edwards right in the head with the ECW title, because what else would you do with the ECW title? That's what you're supposed to do with it. And what a good match, what a nice... The violence was ramped up, they teased the flaming tables, they did the not thumbtacks, but staple guns, there was plenty of chair shots, there was the plunder getting involved, the Singapore King getting involved. Eddie Edwards picked up the win with a shining wizard through a chair into Tommy's face that he calls the Boston Knee Party. I just really enjoyed this. I thought it was a fun match. Afterwards, we see kind of the passing of the torch of Tommy Dreamer handing the kendo stick or Singapore King over to Eddie Edwards. Eddie being conflicted. He's turning into something he doesn't want to be. And he kind of is following the same path that Tommy Dreamer did back in the ECW days. So it's interesting, the dichotomy of the two. Alicia Edwards comes out, tells him to shake Tommy's hand, which was before he did that whole thing. But anyway, I'm jumping all around here. Alicia walks up by herself. The commentators make it a point to point that out. So, I don't know where that part of the storyline's going. Seemingly this part of the storyline is done, that Eddie and Tommy are patched up, they worked out their differences in a way that only two violent men can. I'm going to give this match again a 4 out of 5. I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed this match, and I love Tommy Dreamer, so what can I say? Next up, we had our first of 3 title matches for the night, or actually, 4. First of 4 title matches, sorry. We have Brian Cage versus Matt Sydal for the X Division title. I like this match. I love Brian Cage. Matt Sydal is one of the premier X Division or Cruiserweight style wrestlers in the world. Brian Cage is just a freak of nature. He looks like he'd be a big, unmovable lummox, like how they're been portrayed for years, but he can move and wrestle around and stick with a guy like Matt Sydal. I thoroughly enjoyed this match. It was a really good match. Again, we're coming out, this is the 4th match of the night, and this is the 4th match I really enjoyed. I'm going to give this, Brian Cage picked up the win over Matt Sydal to become the new X Division champion. I'm going to give this match a 4 out of 5. Again, we're going out hot. 3 of the first 4 matches are 4s and 1's a 5, so Slammiversary is kicking off and blowing the doors off the place. Next up, we had this match was, I think when we look back at this, it's going to be underrated and looked over, but I absolutely loved it. We had Su Yung versus Madison Rayne. And I love the whole presentation of Su Yung. Everything from the casket, to the Undead Brides, to the way she wears her gear, to her music, to the spitting the red mist, which is signified blood, to the blood-soaked rags. I loved it. I loved her gimmick. I loved the way she portrays it. Madison Rayne, one of the great women's wrestlers of the last 10, 15 years. One of the people that the Knockouts division was built on. This was a great match. It was a little bit short in my opinion, but it didn't take away from it. I thought it was really good. You really highlighted Su Yung as being basically a quasi-Undertaker type character for the next generation. This is how Bray Wyatt should be portrayed. This is how The Undertaker's been portrayed, and Su Yung is being portrayed in that light. where she's basically unstoppable. I really enjoyed this match. I thought it was really great. It did a lot for the character of Su Yung. And Madison Rayne, knowing her and knowing how much she loves the business, I know that she was happy to facilitate that. Su Yung retains the Knockout Championship. I'm giving the match a 5 out of 5. I love this match. I'm probably going to rate this match higher than most people will, just because the character development and what Su Yung is doing with that character blows me away. And to peel the fourth wall back, I know Sue a little bit through a podcast I work on called Live from the Armory, which go check that out, by the way. I work a lot of behind the scenes stuff. She's been on the show and she's a friend of the show. She's been on a few times. Su Yung, the human being, and Su Yung, the character, couldn't be two different things. But the way the character develops and how she is, it's so good. I love it. I love everything about it. 5 out of 5 for me. Next up, we had the Battle of LAX. Santana and Ortiz going by LAX with Konnan versus the original LAX, Homicide and Hernandez with King. And a 51-50 tag match, hardcore match, whatever you want to call it, for the Impact Tag Team Championships. The thing I didn't get about this, and I know it's a tag match, but there's no rules. King and Konnan, for the most part, stayed out of the match. They didn't have any more interaction than they would have in a normal match. If there's no rules, why are they not fighting along with their soldiers? Just my opinion. The new version of LAX, Santana and Ortiz picks up the win. And after the match, we see the OGs, Homicide, Hernandez, and King, lay a beatdown. So they lost the fight, but won the war, but didn't win the tag titles. This match, in my opinion, suffers on this card for one reason. There were 3 hardcore style matches on the show, and this was the worst of the 3. And that's not to say that this is a bad match. It's not. I don't want you to think it's bad, but when you had to live up to the story that Eddie Edwards and Tommy Dreamer had made earlier, and what comes directly after this, kind of lowers this one down a bit. Kind of takes the sting off it, if you will. I'm giving the match a 3 out of 5. Again, it was a very good match, very entertaining. I think this would have been better served on a card where it wasn't loaded with 3 hardcore matches, which in itself was a little bit of an overkill, but it worked because none of the 3 of the matches were bad and they all made sense as to why they would be there, especially if this is going to be the big pay-per-view of the year, Slammiversary. I like this match. Like I said, though, it suffers a bit against the other 2. Speaking of that, we had a hair versus mask match. Pentagon Jr. versus the Draw Sami Callihan. 2 wrestlers who are probably 2 of the hottest acts in wrestling right now. Sami Callihan, you can't go to a wrestling website without somebody talking about it. Pentagon Jr. is the same way. You can't. They're going on the Jericho cruise. They're going all in. They're doing everything in wrestling. These guys, their names are out there, and they're being pushed to the forefront. I love the fact that these guys are being pushed to the forefront in Impact Wrestling. This was a violent match. This is hardcore, how it's supposed to be. This is deathmatch wrestling, how it's supposed to be. There was lots of twists, lots of turns. OVE trying to get involved. The Chris brothers. The blinding of Pentagon where he accidentally breaks the ref's arm so he can't count the pin. There was so much little subtleties in this match and little acts of violence. Sami Callihan ripping at Pentagon's mask so you could see the blood soaking through and the blood on his face. Both of them were bleeding buckets by the end of the match. It was just violent. And this is why the match before suffered, in my opinion. This match was so good and so much more than just a hardcore brawl. And I'm not, like, again, I'm not knocking the match before, but when you got two guys at the level of Pentagon Jr. and Sami Callihan doing what they're both really good at, they're both extremely good hardcore wrestlers, and they go out like this and they throw on a hardcore clinic. Pentagon Jr. picks up the win, eventually shaves Sami Callihan's head. I give this match a 5 out of 5. This is probably my favorite match of the night. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Now, last but not least, the main event of the night for the Impact World Heavyweight Championship. Austin Aries versus Moose. I like this match. Much like I said with the LAX versus OG's match, it suffers a bit to me. Because we have such violence on the show, feud enders, we have an insane X Division match to start the show, 2 really good Knockouts Divisions matches, 2 excellent hardcore matches, and another really good hardcore match, and a really good match between Brian Cage and Matt Sydal. This match didn't feel like it had the juice of the other matches. It didn't feel like it had the importance of being the world title match. It didn't feel like it was something... How can I put this? And this isn't a knock with either guys. I think Moose is a great talent. I think Austin Aries is a great talent. It just didn't feel as important. It didn't feel like the most important match on the show, which is what the World Championship should be. And that's where it took it away from me a little bit. This felt like it should have been a main event on an Impact television show, not on your main pay-per-view of the year. And again, it was a really good match. Aries beat Moose. Overall, I give the match a 3 out of 5. It was a clean win, a very good match, but just didn't, with everything else we've seen on the night, and I hate to say this because it's going to sound so negative, but the main event was my least favorite match of the night. If we were to rank them from worst to first, this would be the worst for me. And I don't know that it's Moose. I don't know that it's Austin Aries. Sometimes you just put 2 really good wrestlers together and they don't work. It happens. It's happened all through history. I mean, there's guys that Ric Flair didn't have good matches with. Yes, there is. It happened. You can go back and see it. Trust me. There's guys that Shawn Michaels didn't have great matches with. There's guys that Bret Hart didn't have great matches with. There's guys that Bryan Danielson doesn't have great matches with. Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Kenny Omega. And it's just, every now and again it happens. It really felt like a really good match, and if it would have been the main event of the Thursday Night Impact show, I would probably rank it a little higher. Being the main event of a card that was as stacked as this card was, yeah, it takes a little bit of a knock for me. So I give it a 3 out of 5. Overall, some observations. I love the setting in the more intimate setting in the nightclub. I love the aesthetic there. I love the crowd. The crowd was amazing. They weren't smarky. They were into it. They were chanting Impact Wrestling. They were chanting along with the wrestlers. It was fantastic. The crowd and the setting was amazing. The rampway, the setup for it, the yellow ropes, all the little details. It felt like I was watching something different. It felt like I was watching something new. And when TNA is at, or now Impact Wrestling, it's hard for me after so many years to call Impact, calling it TNA. When Impact Wrestling is at its best, this is what it feels like. It feels different. You have fantastic knockout matches. You have hardcore brawls. You have the X Division shining. You have masterpieces with wrestlers like Brian Cage and Matt Sydal. And this, if you were to ask me what Impact Wrestling could be at its best, this was it. This is probably, from top to bottom, one of the best shows this company's ever put on. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was probably, I mean, other than maybe Unbreakable in 2005, probably the best show they've ever put on. And I'm not saying that with hyperbole. Well, I'm not trying to overblow this, but I really enjoyed it, and I really think they just blew it out the water, knocked it out of the park, whatever acronym you want to give. Thought this was a really, really good show. And overall, I'm going to give it a 4 3/4 out of 5. The only reason it doesn't get a 5 is the main event, basically. The main event fell a little bit short, but other than that, and even that main event, if you would have took that main event, if a year ago I would have had that main event on an Impact Wrestling show, it would probably have been the best match of the night. But what happened during the night, the bar got set so high that unfortunately the main event didn't jump above that bar, which it should. The main event should be the best match of the night with your best wrestlers wrestling for the biggest prize. That's wrestling at its purest form. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it yet, please go out and watch this. Give Impact another chance if you're one of the people that have gone away over the years. They're going in the right direction. They've got some real talent here. I mean, Jesus. Just look at everybody I mean. Johnny Impact, Fenix, Petey Williams, Ishimori, Tessa Blanchard, Allie, Eddie Edwards, Tommy Dreamer, Brian Cage, Matt Sydal, Sue Young, Madison, Rayne, Ortiz and Santana, Homicide and Hernandez, Pentagon Jr., Sami Callihan, Austin Aries, Moose. What a freaking stacked roster. And that's not even everybody they have. They have other great wrestlers like Eli Drake. They have other great teams, and they have other great X Division talent. It's a really special time in Impact Wrestling, and I really think they're on an upswing. If you haven't checked them out in a while, go back and check them out. I highly recommend the show they're putting on. The show they're putting on weekly is rather good, and this pay-per-view is excellent. Probably the best pay-per-view of the year so far. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been my review of Impact Wrestling Slammiversary 16.